Hi guys, and welcome to my new special series called FM15 Decides. What FM15 Decides is, and what FM16 Decides will be, is Football Manager predicting or deciding who will be best suited to be the new manager of clubs when they've sacked their manager. So today's episode focuses on Aston Villa because Aston Villa sacked Tim Sherwood on Sunday after they got beaten by Swansea on the weekend. So what we're going to do, we're going to compare, I think it's 5 managers that are in with a shout of becoming the next manager. We're going to run through a few years, see how they get on, see how long they last, if they win any trophies, anything like that. And at the end, we'll come to a conclusion of who Aston Villa should pick to be their new manager. So first up, as you can see, is Remi Garde. He's the favourite. So what we're going to do is we're going to holiday 1 year and see how Aston Villa and Remi Garde get on. Okay guys, so it's been a year and Remi Garde is still the manager of Aston Villa. Let's go to the Premier League, see where they finished. They finished 9th in the Premier League. It's a pretty okay start for Villa. See how they got on in the cup competitions. So FA Cup, they reached the 5th round but were knocked out by Everton. Capital One Cup, they've got all the way to the final in the Capital One Cup, but they got beat in the final by Chelsea. Let's have a look at what transfers he made. So he only signed one player. He signed Mathieu Flamini from Arsenal for £2.5 million. And he sold Kieran Clark, sent a few people out on loan. It's not a bad start for Remi Garde. Let's do another year, see how he gets on, see if he stays at Villa, see if they improve on the league positions. They finished 9th, reached the final of the Capital One Cup, and reached the 5th round of the FA Cup. Okay guys, and we're back. It's the end of the second season with Remi Garde in charge of Aston Villa. Let's see how they've done. So we'll look at the Premier Division first. They've got in the Europa League. They finished 7th. That's 2 places higher than last season. It's a good start. What about the cups? It's Capital One Cup. Knocked out in the 4th round 1-0 against Chelsea. Anthony Martial playing for Chelsea now. And then the FA Cup, knocked out in the 5th round again, losing to Hull. Are Hull still in the Premier League? Yes, they are. Lost to Hull in the FA Cup. Let's just have a look at transfers that he made. He made a few more transfers this season. So he got in Johnny Williams, whoever he is, from Crystal Palace. 22-year-old, bad. And he got Jordi Classy from Southampton, nearly 10 million. Andy Carroll, 4.5 million from West Ham. Alen Halilovic on loan from Barca, and Brian Evans from Fulham. Outgoings, the main one, Leandro Bacuna went to Norwich. Gary Gardner, Joe Cole went to Celtic for less than 20 grand. Okay, so it's 2 seasons in, and Remi Garde is still the Aston Villa manager, and he's shown improvement in the league in both of his seasons. So let's skip ahead to the end of his 3rd season in charge of Aston Villa. It's the end of the 3rd season with Remi Garde as Aston Villa manager. Let's see how they've done. So you can see there they finished 7th again, not getting a European place this season. 4 points. They got 4 points more than last season. Last season they got 54 points. This season they got 58, which means every season they've increased the number of points that they've got. So they started off with 53, as I said, moved up to 54 and then 58. 7th place. Let's see how they got on in the cup competitions. Okay, FA Cup. He got knocked out of the FA Cup at the 4th round by Sunderland. Capital One Cup knocked out in the third round by Arsenal. And Europa League, they they got knocked out in the Europa League playoff by Ajax. Let's have a look at the transfers. Incomings, they spent 11 million. They got Carlos Asquez from Wolfsburg, Ali Adnan from Udinese, Ricardo van Rijn, Mario Pasalic. Oh, they got Chris Smalling from Manchester United, and Obafemi Martins from Seattle Sounders. How did Obafemi Martins do? 1 goal in 4 games. It's not bad. Might have scored more if he'd... Oh, they got Philippe Casido as well. 5 goals in 10. Not bad at all. Who went out? They sold Horace Akore, 7.25 million, and Jose Angel Crespo for 200,000, as well as some loan signings, loan sales even. Charles Nzogbia got released. Alan Hutton got released. And Adama Traore, former Barcelona player, went on loan to Middlesbrough and only played twice. So 3 seasons gone. Remi Garde still in a job, showing progress each season, apart from in the Cups. So we will go on to the next season, see what happens. We're back for the end of season 4, and Remi Garde is still Aston Villa manager. Let's see how they got on this season. As you can tell, they finished 5th in the Premier League, just missing out on the Champions League places by 2 points, finishing above Chelsea and Man City. 5th place, 64 points. That's the highest total and the highest league finish since he took charge. Let's have a look at the Cups now. The FA Cup, they reached the 5th round, beating Colchester and Reading on the way. And they lost 2-1 to Bolton in the 5th round. Capital One Cup reached the 4th round, losing to Manchester United 4-1. Got a guy sent off. And finally, Europa League. They actually made it into the Europa League group stages and beyond this season, beating Atromitos 4-2 on aggregate in the 3rd qualifying round. They beat Copenhagen 5-3 on aggregate. And then in the group stages, they drew Hannover, Ludogorets and Roma. They beat Hannover 1-0, drew 1-1 with Ludogorets, beat Roma at Roma, drew 1-1 at home against Roma, and beat Hannover 2-1 and Ludogorets 4-0. And then they got Dynamo Kiev in the first knockout round, winning both games 2-0. And they got knocked out in the second knockout round by Valencia, losing 2-0 and 2-1, respectively. Let's have a look at the transfers. A lot of money spent there, 23 million. Let's have a look at who they got. They got Richmond Buaki from Juventus, Andreas Cornelius from Stuttgart, Luka Jovic, Gregor Zabret, James Atkinson, Paul Dummett, Ellis Callaway. Joel Ward is their biggest outlay, £8 million for him. Matthew Barnes, 950k. Saul, 1.2 million from Chelsea. And Matt Ingram from Wickham. Well, they did sell their fair share of players as well. They sold 17.25 million worth of players. Ali Adnan going to Atletico for 7.5 million. Philippe Senderos going to Dnipro for less than 100k. Mathieu Flamini just over 100k. Jordan Ayew to Hull for just over 1 million. Ricardo van Rijn to Napoli for over 8 million. Obafemi Martins to Guangzhou for 350k. They got him for a free last season, so that's good profit made on him. What we're going to do is we're going to take it up to the end of the next season, which will be our 5th season with Remi Garde as manager, and then we will move on to the next candidate for the Aston Villa vacancy. Season 5 now, guys, and as you can see, Remi Garde is no longer the manager of Aston Villa. Let's find out if he resigned or if he was sacked. Okay, and as you can see, Aston Villa finished 17th in the Premier League. Let's just find out when he was sacked. 29th of December. So they obviously had a poor season in the league at least. Finishing 17th, 3 points clear of the relegation zone. And let's have a look at the FA Cup. FA Cup, they were held to a replay in the third round against Scunthorpe, and then they beat them 3-0 in the replay, and then got knocked out by Bournemouth in the fourth round. Made it all the way to the Capital One Cup final again, and lost again to Tottenham, 2-1 in the final. They beat Oldham, Cardiff, Swansea and Reading on the way to the final, but were defeated the last hurdle. Finally, for cup competitions, the Europa League, they won all of their group games against Trabzonspor, Cluj and Ajax. And then they played Fenerbahce in the first knockout round, won both games 1-0 and 2-0. And then they played Roma in the second knockout round, who they managed to beat the season before, but they got beaten both times and were knocked out. Looking at transfers, Remi Garde spent £22 million, 4.4 million on Kevin Wimmer, 1.5 million on Ali Adnan, who they sold a couple of seasons ago, I think. Graham Marwood for 1.4 million, Johannes Guys for 4.9 million, Andreas Christensen for 6 million, Eugenio Mena for 2 million, and Matthew McParland for 1.5 million. And the sales, they sold Gregor Zabret to Newcastle, sold Jordan Amavi to Liverpool part exchange and got Jordan Ibe, Andy Carroll to Reading, Nathan Baker to Middlesbrough, and Carlos Gill to Brentford. So Remi Garde managed to stay 4.5 seasons at Aston Villa, got them up to the lofty heights of 5th place in the league. Best in the FA Cup was the 5th round, and he made it to the final of the League Cup in his first season. The question is, can David Moyes do better than Remi Garde? So the answer to that question would be no, as David Moyes has been sacked after just one season in charge of Aston Villa. The reason for him being sacked? Aston Villa were relegated, bottom of the league, 20 points. Just terrible. Nothing compared to Remi Garde. So in the FA Cup, they made it to a replay against Sunderland in the 5th round, but they got beaten 1-0. They beat Coventry and QPR in the 3rd and 4th rounds. Capital One Cup, they beat Scunthorpe in the 2nd round, Sunderland in the 3rd round, Doncaster in the 4th round, and they lost in extra time in the quarter-final against Reading. Transfer-wise, the only signing was Mathieu Flamini from Arsenal for £2.1 million, and they loaned Gary Gardner out twice to Blackburn and Sheffield Wednesday. So, not the best from David Moyes. Up next, Gus Poyet gets a turn at being Aston Villa manager. See if he can improve on David Moyes, which isn't hard to do. See if he can better Remi Garde's 4.5 season stay at Villa Park. It's the end of Gus Poyet's first season in charge of Aston Villa, and he's still in a job, so he's done better than David Moyes already. Let's see how they did in the league. So Aston Villa finishing 11th in the league, joint on points with 10th place Norwich. Not bad, mid-table finish. Probably what they'd take this season in real life anyway. Definitely what they'd take, considering they're in the relegation battle. So in the FA Cup, they were defeated in the first round against fellow Premier League team West Ham. And in the League Cup, they overcame Cambridge United in the second round 2-1, but they lost to Premier League side Leicester 2-0 in the third round. In terms of transfers, Gus Poyet decided against buying Mathieu Flamini, which seems to be the go-to signing for any Aston Villa manager. Both Remi Garde and David Moyes signed him. Instead, Gus Poyet signed Wayne Routledge for £4 million from Swansea. That's his only signing. And he loaned out Gary Gardner to Charlton and Jack Grealish to QPR, and then released Gary Gardner in January. So after 2 seasons in charge of Aston Villa, Gus Poyet has been sacked by the board. Let's see why that is. Obviously last season they finished 11th, reached the third round of both of the cups. This season, disappointing 15th. Just 5 points clear of the relegation zone, so they were obviously in the relegation battle. Gus Poyet was sacked at the end of the season. In terms of the cups, he did get them further in the FA Cup. They got through to the 5th round, getting beaten in a replay against Stoke 1-0 at the Britannia. They beat Wickham and Leeds to get to the 5th round. Then in the Capital One Cup, they beat Huddersfield in the 2nd round but lost 2-0 to Crystal Palace in the 3rd round. In terms of transfers, a bit more business from Gus. He went to his old club and signed Adam Johnson and Matteo Flamini. He signed Jason Pearce from Wigan, Cyprian Marika from Konyaspor, John Onoritza from Delhi, Antonio Di Natale on a free from Udinese, and Eric Peters from Stoke. But that couldn't save his job. He did sell a few players as well. He sold Carlos Gil to Norwich for $6.5 million, Jose Angel Crespo also to Norwich for $1.1 million, Anna Samarovic to Admira Vaca Modelling, some strange named team, Philip Senderos to Lille, Libor Kozak to Hanover, and Jordan Ayew to Bournemouth. So Gus Poyet lasts a season longer than David Moyes, but comes nowhere near to Remi Garde's 4.5 seasons. Can anybody beat Remi Garde's 4.5 seasons? So yet another manager has only lasted the one season. Nigel Pearson being sacked by Aston Villa at the end of his first season in charge. Let's find out why. So in the Premier League, they just survived on goal difference. -18, Stoke got relegated on -30. That's the reason why Nigel Pearson was sacked as Aston Villa manager. In the FA Cup, they were knocked out in the 3rd round against Swansea 2-1. League Cup, they beat Accrington Stanley 2-0 in the 2nd round, but were beaten 2-1 by Liverpool in the 3rd round. Transfer-wise, Nigel Pearson decided to go with what Gus Poyet did and sign Wayne Routledge from Swansea for £4.1 million, but he also signed Dwight Gale from Crystal Palace for £2.8 million. Neither of those people could save Pearson his job, however. He sent Jack Grealish on loan, Gerald Sellers he sold to Brentford, Gary Gardner on loan, and Jordan Veretout on loan. So we have one more manager coming up. Let's see if he can do any better than Remi Garde at Aston Villa. So Brendan Rodgers has successfully completed his first season in charge of Aston Villa, and he is still in a job, which is better than Pearson and Moyes at the moment anyway. So let's see what happened. Aston Villa finished 9th in the table, 56 points. It's a pretty solid finish for them. In the FA Cup, they reached the 5th round replay against Tottenham. They beat Millwall 6-1 in the 3rd round, beat Portsmouth 2-0 in the 4th round, drew 2-2 at Villa Park against Tottenham in the 5th round, and then lost the replay 2-1 in normal time. In the Capital One Cup, they beat Huddersfield 2-1 in the 2nd round, shocked Chelsea in the 3rd round, beat Burnley 2-1 in the 4th round, and lost 2-0 in the quarter-final against Manchester City. In terms of transfers that Brendan Rodgers brought in, he signed Darren Gibson for $3.5 million from Everton, signed a free transfer Zvezdan Misimovic, Danny Graham from Sunderland, and Ryan Fulton, Liverpool's young goalkeeper. In terms of outgoings, he sent Jack Grealish on loan, released Gary Gardner, sold Alan Hutton to Norwich for $1.3 million, sold Jed Steer to Ipswich for $170,000, and loaned Jordan Amavi out to Bolton. Let's see how he does in his second season. Can he do better than Gus Poyet, who got sacked at the end of his second season? Will Brendan Rodgers still be in a job? It's the end of Brendan Rodgers' second season in charge, and as you can see, he is no longer in charge. So what happened? Brendan Rodgers sacked on the 17th of May 2016, at the end of the season. Let's see why that was. So Aston Villa weren't relegated. They were pretty clear of the relegation zone as well. He mustn't have met his expectations. They must have expected more from him, considering his first season was so good in terms of league position. Got them to 9th, I remember. So 15th this season, not the best. In the Cups, he got through to the 6th round of the FA Cup, which was one round further than last season. Beat Leyton Orient, Barnsley and Watford on the way to the 6th round tie, which he lost 2-0 to his former club, Liverpool. And in the Capital One Cup, they also lost to Liverpool. Bit of a bogey team from there. Beat Bristol City in the second round. Now for transfers, he did make quite a few. Got Michael Keane from Burnley, Arkadiusz Milik from Ajax, Jose Paulo Guerrero on a free, Chris Smalling from Man United, Brandon Barker on loan from Man City, Yunus Belhanda from Arsenal, Sebastian Prudel from Watford, and Martin Di Michaelis from Manchester City. And in terms of sales, he sold Kieran Clark to Hull, also loaned Jack Grealish to Hull, sold Philip Senderos to Lille, loaned Amavi to Reading, loaned Nathan Baker to QPR, sold Libor Kozak to Hanover, and sold Joris Okore to Barcelona for 13.25 million, which isn't too bad at all. So that's it for FM Decides, and we'll just do a quick conclusion to wrap it up. I don't think I really need to say this, but Aston Villa directors, whoever's in charge of hiring your next manager, if you're listening, Remi Garde is the man to hire. Sure, he'll only be good for the first 4 seasons, and then you'll have to sack him halfway through the 5th one, but he'll get you into Europe, he'll get you a few points off the Champions League places. What more could you ask for? If Remi Garde's in charge of Aston Villa, it's going to be interesting times for you guys, according to Football Manager, that is. Let me know in the comments who you think Aston Villa should hire, and if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe to my channel, and if any more Premier Division managers or maybe other managers get sacked, I will try my best to do one of these videos for it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.